you ever think about how you'd want to be remembered? I know some people may not think about that, other people may think about it a lot. But how we're remembered, both by our family, our friends, strangers, people we've come into contact with, how would you want to be remembered? So that's the topic for today's video. I'm sorry I'm filming this outside, it's a little windy, hopefully you can hear it okay. To me, how we're remembered is a type of legacy that we have. It's what we leave behind. And at the end of this video, I hope you'll stay to the end, I'm going to share with you something I wrote for a very dear friend of mine who passed away far too young when he was only 23 years old. But before I get to that, I'm going to talk a little bit about what legacy means. What does it mean to leave a legacy? And I don't mean money or property. That's typically, traditionally, how legacy is viewed. But I mean who we are and what we did in the world. Did we do good in the world, or did we do evil in the world? Did we make the world a better place by our presence or not? You know, those kinds of things to me are important. Now, if that's not important to you, click off this video right now. You don't need to watch any more of this. If you don't care how you're remembered, that's fine. That's your choice. A lot of people, I think, do care how they're remembered. I think the energy we have carries on even after we're gone. And I think what we leave in the world is important. Now, the ship has sailed on my family. I doubt I'm going to do much to change that. It's possible. Anything is possible. But I think for me, when I was a teacher for 13 years, it was important that I had some impact on some students in my class. And I know, in fact, that I did. And many of them told me that afterwards. But it's also important to me, it was part of the reason I started this YouTube channel, was to also have an impact on people through this. Anyway, so I'm going to head inside now because it's really windy, and I'm going to finish this indoors. Came in from the outside where it was extremely windy, and hopefully you could hear that segment on the video. But again, if you're still with me on this, I hope you'll stay with me till the end. I have something special planned for the end, and I'll get to that in a few minutes. But let's talk a little bit more about how you want to be remembered, how we all want to be remembered. So, of course, we can think of really negative examples of that. I mean, you think about horrible people throughout history who are remembered for like despicable things. And you think to yourself, yeah, they've moved on, they passed on, whatever. I'm sure they didn't really care. But their legacy is written in the history books, and it's always really negative. And if it's true that our soul is eternal, which I believe it is there not some aspect of you that does know that throughout eternity? You know what you did in a certain lifetime. Even if there's a possibility of that, I would not want to be remembered for some horrible things I did. Now, fortunately, I don't think I've done anything that horrible in my life, which is good. I'm working really hard to not do that. But I also have not been the best person. I certainly have made mistakes, as we know from my family situation, especially with my son. And, you know, I'm not going to avoid, you know, as I said, when I was sitting outside there, the ship has sailed on the how I'm going to be remembered by my family. Barring some sort of miracle, I don't really see that changing. But I still have tried to make a difference in other people's lives in a more positive way, whether it's through teaching or now through the YouTube channel. So let's talk a little about is it too late to do anything? Maybe you're thinking it's too late, maybe how I'm remembered. I don't believe that. I don't believe that. I don't think it's ever too late to become who you might have been. I'm going to say that again. I don't think it's too late to ever become who you might have been. I think the seeds of that are in us, and we can activate those at any time in our lives, and I don't think it's ever too late. You know, even if people make a change in the last year of their life, I don't think it's too late. I think it's better late than never, as the old saying goes. Better late than never. Something I tried to get across to my mother, but it didn't work. She kept saying it was just too late, it was too late, it was too late. And she lived another, 15 years. So it wasn't too late. But the thing is, people have this idea that, well, that's how people think of me, but you know what? You can always change. You can always change. You know, to me, life is a journey. Life is a journey. And it's also kind of a schoolroom. We're learning things as we go. You know, maybe we made a lot more mistakes when we were in our teens or 20s or 30s, but we can always turn that around. Now, it may not be enough to turn around, you know, relationships with people that got burned along the way. It's possible it doesn't do that, but it certainly gets turned around enough that we can be a different kind of person and we can lead a different type of life. That's how I live my life at this point in time. That's how I advocate that other people live their lives, is that always be looking for a way to do better with your life in the world. Don't just be in it just for you. Also do something to, in some way, motivate other people, help other people, either concretely or emotionally or whatever. Do whatever you can. And I say whatever you can because it's whatever you're able to do. We can't help others at the expense of our own well-being either, in the sense that you don't make yourself sick by only tending to other people and you don't take care of yourself. You have to take care of yourself. Otherwise, what have you got left? But back to this idea of it's a journey. It's a journey, and to me, the important thing is to do the best that you can in your life to become a better person. That's my take on it. That I really believe that, and I live my life that way. I'm not going to give up on myself. I'm not going to give up on myself. I was never a horrible person, but I did things that I'm not proud of. I did not do my best in my relationships, whether it was with my son or in other types of relationships in my life. But I also did some things right. And so the thing is, it's never about beating yourself up. And it's never about, because you do that and then you're never going to crawl out of the hole. But if you want to be remembered as being a better person, then do something about it. Do something about it. It's never too late as long as your mind is still working and you still have the ability to do something in your life, even if it's from a chair. You can always strive to be a better person. And if the people you've known most of your life don't believe it or don't want to acknowledge, you know, a lot of times people in our lives, especially family, don't want to acknowledge that we've changed because they have this image of us and they don't want to really acknowledge that maybe we've changed. So you may not be able to convince them, but you don't have to convince them. You only have to know it yourself. You only have to know it yourself what you're doing and that you're striving to become a better person. And then you know what? You don't have to really worry about how you're going to be remembered, because if you've done the best you can to be a better person every year of your life as you get older, there are people that will remember you and they will remember you fondly. Now, I'm going to, in kind of transitioning to the last part of this video, I'm going to tell you a story about a very good friend of mine that I met in college, and his name was Richard. And Richard was an extremely talented actor, had a tremendous future ahead of him. He was incredibly talented. He could sing, he could act. And I knew Richard for the last probably 3 years of his life. And he made a mark on me. He really did. And I have never forgotten him, as I'll share with you in a few minutes. But let me tell you a little bit about Richard. So Richard was a brilliant guy, very dynamic, very tremendous sense of humor. We were just friends. We were never romantic partners. And but we ended up going on a study tour to Russia, and when we were seniors in college, and there was a whole bunch of us in the group, but I had such a wonderful time with him, and we had both studied Russian history and some Russian language, and we just had this wonderful time. And I actually referenced that in the song that I did, where I talk about singing our way down marbled halls, because that's a reference to what we did when we were in Russia going to the palaces. Warning at this point, if you're triggered by suicide or something like that, please don't watch anymore if it's going to upset you. Because my friend Richard was tormented, and I did not realize how much. And when we graduated from college, we were still good friends. In fact, he was trying to get me into theater, and I just had decided that that was not the route I could go in my life. I didn't feel like I had enough talent. I also just, I knew I didn't really want that life. So he got a job initially out of college working for the Shakespeare Theater Company in Washington, D.C. And I think it was the Folger Shakespeare Company at that time. I don't know if it still has the same name. And he got cast immediately in their plays. And to tell you how good he was, Richard, one time, Sir John Gielgud, a very famous British actor, you probably have heard his name, came to see one of the shows there at the Folger. And he came backstage afterwards and went up to Richard and said to him, "You're an incredible actor. I would love to basically be in a production with you." Now, from Sir John Gielgud to receive that kind of praise, you know how good you have to be. So I don't really understand. I know he had some mental health issues. I know he was dealing with some physical issues as well. I don't really know what kind of prompted him to do what he did. But I'd say about 2 or 3 weeks before he died, I had gone to see him in a production at the Folger, and we went out to supper afterwards, and we were sitting in this restaurant, and I still have that image burned into my brain. I remember exactly where we were sitting, exactly what it was like sitting across. We were in a booth, and I remember sitting across the table from him. And I kept telling him, I said, "Oh, you're going to be so, Sir John Gielgud had already talked to him a couple weeks before. And I said to him, "Oh, you're going to be so famous." And I said, "It's going to be great because I'm your friend and I will have known you before you became famous." And I said, and I just was going on. I was gushing because, I never really had a friend that I really knew was going to really make it. That's how I viewed him. I really felt like he was going to make it and really be a star. He would have been an incredible character actor or something. And so I said all that, and I said, I think I said, again, "You're going to be famous." And he said very quietly, he just looked at me across the table and he said, "No, I'm not." He said, "You do it for me." And I thought that was so strange at the time, but it didn't really trigger a warning bell in my head. He'd never talked about killing himself. He had never talked about ending his life in any way. It didn't trigger anything in me. And I thought it was odd that he said it, which is why I remember it. I thought, why did he say that? Well, we said goodnight that night, and I got back in my car and drove back to Northern Virginia where I lived, and I talked to him on the phone maybe a week later, and it was perfectly normal conversation. And then about another week or two after that, I get a phone call one evening from a mutual friend of ours who told me that Richard had killed himself. And I was, of course, shocked, as anybody would be. And again, I'm sorry if this triggers something in you if you're still watching this. But I was so shocked. And he apparently did not leave a note. He had no siblings. His parents were older. He was kind of a late in life child. And his parents were older. I didn't really know his parents well. I think I'd only met them once, so I didn't feel comfortable calling them. He had some friends, but we didn't all know each other. Like I knew this one mutual friend of ours, but I didn't know all of his friends. As far as I know, he left no note. I don't think there was a funeral service. There was no way of really knowing what happened. I don't know if it was I believe it was building in him for some time, though, because I believe that message he gave to me at that dinner really meant something. That he had already thought about it or maybe even decided. So, after he died, I was left with this horrible, empty feeling of not just losing a friend. I mean, he had been my friend for about 3 years. But it was the idea of how could he do that when he had such a bright future ahead of him? It didn't make any sense to me. It never made any sense to me. And because I never got resolution of it, I never knew why he did it. But it just stayed with me. It stayed with me all those years. So about 3 years ago, and he had written me some cards and some notes, and I have kept those all these years as well in my little memorabilia box. And about 3 years ago, I ended up writing a song for Richard. The song is called Sun, Moon, and Stars, and I'm going to put that at the end of this video here in just a moment. But the reason I'm sharing this about Richard is I always have thought to myself how he was remembered. That's why I have the topic for today's video about that. I don't know if he would have wanted to be remembered a certain way. I don't know that. I don't know if he'd be surprised that I remembered him all these years. Maybe his other friends remembered him as well. I know his parents have probably long passed away. He didn't have any sisters or brothers. He hadn't been married. He hadn't been in a close relationship. So who else would remember him? There's very few of us probably. Very few of us probably left. But I know that I always remembered him fondly and with kind of a smile on my face, because when I was around him, he was such a force of joy and excitement and humor that I couldn't help but enjoy being around him. And that's how I've remembered him. And that's what really made me think about, when I had one of the viewers leave a comment about the fact that about 50 years after we're gone, the last people who really knew us will be gone. And then will we be remembered at all? In honor of him, and in this song, which I wrote about 3 years ago, he will live on. He will live on. So I'm doing this in honor of Richard, and stay tuned here for Sun, Moon, and Stars.
I wish it hadn't been this long. It seems like yesterday you left this world without a word. You left us to ask why and pray. I wish you could be here still with all whom you had loved. We never knew it was to blame. Could only look to skies above. Sun, moon, and stars, they'll remember you. Sun, moon, and stars, and I remember too. I wish you could see the world and how it all has changed. Who I've become, what I've done, and how my life got rearranged. I wish I could hear your voice echo from stage to stage. We'd sing our way through marbled halls, never a need to turn the page. Sun, moon, and stars, they'll remember you. Sun, moon, and stars, too. I wish they all remembered you as much or more than I. I see your smile, gentle nod. You wave to me your last goodbye. Sun, moon, and stars, they'll remember you. Sun, moon, and stars, and I remember too. Sun, moon, and stars, they'll remember you. Sun, moon, and stars, and I'll remember too.